Welcome to Fancounters, everyone. My name's Nick.
And I'm Elizabeth.
And this week we had St. Nick stop by our home.
We did.
Did he stop by your home?
He does. He comes on the night of the 5th, and my children have been talking about it for weeks already, saying, when does St. Nick come? When does St. Nick come? And there's a little bit confusion in our house about St. Nick versus Santa Claus, so we've had to keep having the conversation about the differences between the two of them. And St. Nick always brings our Christmas jammies, and then also our ornament, a little bit of candy, and usually that's about it. So they're not, we have enormous stockings, but they're filled with tissue paper and then just a little bit of candy and an ornament.
All right. I am lucky. My in-laws get to play St. Nick for us, so I don't have to do squat.
That's very nice.
Which makes it really easy. So that they get fruit and candy and toys, and the same thing. They get a jammies for the holiday season, and it was nice. So before we get to this week's guest, I want to tell you about a new podcast that I found. It's called the Bodaciously Awesome Family Show. So you might be into this. I don't know. You've not heard it, right?
Right.
Okay, so let me tell you about it. It's a father and son team, and they team up to help parents maximize their kids' experience, which is really what we all want to do.
Yes.
Give them the best childhood that we can, better than ours. So Adam, Anthony, and Zachary, they go on little adventures. They go on big ones and small ones and vacations and all that, and they talk about the takeaways and experiences that came along with those experiences. They've talked about their trip to Seattle, to different destinations in Florida. They talked about going to Maggiano's and also the jumping place, those trampoline parks. They talked about the takeaway from that. So each episode's really quick. They're only 15 minutes long. And it's the perfect thing to have while you're just sitting in car line and listening to something with your kids. So check it out. It's the Bodaciously Awesome Family Show, and then you can find it on iTunes and Stitcher. And make sure to give it a try with your kids in the car because you're going to be laughing all the way to school. These guys it's really well done.
Cool. Yeah. Looking forward to it.
So check it out. This week's guest, let's talk about that. Today we're welcoming a Sri Lankan British stand-up comedian, Romesh Ranganathan, who is playing the Greek Theater in Los Angeles on Thursday, December 21st. Now, the crazy part of the story, Elizabeth, is that Romesh has bought out the 5,900-seat theater with no U.S. fan base.
What?
Yeah, he just moved to Los Angeles with his family, and he's really big in the UK. He's got hundreds of videos online, and he's been on television shows all over the UK. But once you fall in love with Romesh on today's show, you're going to go to Ticketmaster.com if you're in the LA area, or you can go to the Greek Theater's website and you'll get your tickets to support Romesh. He's taken on a big task. He's got a lot of tickets to sell, and we're having him here so that we can help him.
Yeah. He is already one of England's most respected and popular performers, and he's sold out theaters all over England, as well as venues in his Australian tour. Romesh's story, from teaching in the classroom to making people laugh on stage, will be featured today.
I'm looking forward to talking to him.
Let's go.
All right.
Coming to you from nowhere near the entertainment capital of the world, this is Fancounters, the podcast.
You're amazing. You need to come to Hollywood. I'm going to make you famous.
There was this mob of people, and they're screaming my name.
Crazy fans.
Stop following me. Don't come around my house. If you do, the cops are going to be at yours.
I think this guy wants to fight me. Ended up being a fan.
There's just security guards with M16 holding fans back.
Are you kidding me?
I continually will get stopped.
Can I take a picture? Oh my God.
I definitely declined signing body parts.
Oh, I don't want to go there.
I'm the only one that's ever spit on Sam Jackson and lived to tell about it.
That's why we call it Fancounters.
I don't think you're going to last on the air very long.
Thank you for joining us on Fancounters.
No, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You bet. So we talked a little bit about your history in your opening, but you've been living your dream lately, and you've sure come a long way since you were 8 years old, reciting jokes from a book at holiday camp. So we're wondering, have you always wanted a career in show business?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I'm from a Sri Lankan background, so show business is not a thing.
Right.
My family grew up watching comedy, but comedy was never ever going to be good enough to replace being a doctor. Do you know what I mean? Which was what my parents had in mind for me. But it was only later on, because I went into teaching. It was only later on when I sort of gave stand-up a go, just because I loved it and I just wanted to have a go. But I thought when I started doing it, I was just going to do stand-up as a hobby. You know, like how all teachers have failed something else.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of my aspiration, was to sort of, people go, oh, do you see Mr. Ranganathan went and he was doing a gig or whatever. So I never thought I was going to end up doing it for a job. It just sort of happened by accident.
Your story is about going from being a math teacher to entertaining millions of people with your comedy. It's a dream that many people have. But at the time of your jump, you and your wife welcomed your first child. Tell us about the decision you made for you to take the leap and follow your dream.
Well, it just felt like before, when I was single and didn't have any kids, it didn't feel like it was the right time. Do you know what I mean? Because I didn't have any dependents. So I thought once somebody else's sort of life is dependent on my career, I thought that's the perfect time to roll the dice and go into something really risky. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah.
It was,
that seems like a perfect time to do that.
It was arguably a stupid time to do it, but it just sort of happened that I'd started gigging, and then we had our kid, and then our first child, and then it just sort of started to take off from there. But I was in a secure job, so it's sort of the reverse of how it should have gone down, really. And it did. And to be honest with you, it didn't go well initially. Like we really struggled, and it was a mistake. It looked like a mistake for about 2 years, and then I reckon, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say we were like 4 months away from me sort of knocking it on the head and going back to teaching when it started to take off, and then we ended up sort of going, okay, this is going to be all right. But it was bad for a long time.
Oh, bummer.
Let's start a little bit before that. I'm just curious, what made you choose teaching in the first place?
The truth is, when I was at like college or uni or whatever, I sort of just thought I want to do something. One, my parents are putting pressure on me, like good pressure, but they're putting pressure on me to find something that was going to set me up for life. So I was sort of looking for jobs that were well paid, and then I ended up being a cost analyst for an airline caters, which is as exciting as me describing the job title to you there. But basically, what would happen is I'd have to work out the cost for the airlines of, like, if they wanted a lasagna on economy, I'd have to tell them how much it cost to have that on all of their flights. Right?
Oh my gosh.
So, but that job was deeply depressing. And so, like, every now and again, I just thought, this can't be my life. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then I thought, well, okay, teaching pays less, but it's something that I feel passionate about. So, I just ended up going into that. Like, not ended up going into that. It's very, very quick, actually, because I'd sort of made the decision to leave that job as a cost analyst. It didn't feel like it was my calling. Do you know what I mean? So I just phoned up the school, and they had a training program, and literally 2 days later, I was training to be a teacher.
Oh my gosh!
So you spent quite a bit of time in the classroom. We're kind of curious. Do you think that kids have it easier or harder than when we were in school?
Wow, that is people like to say that kids have it easier. I don't think that's true. I mean, I think that education is a lot better now. Like, I think that the teaching methods are better, and I think that, like when I was at school, like particularly because I taught maths, but like when I was at school learning it, it would be like, this is how you do it, memorize how to do it, and that is it. Do you know what I mean? Whereas now, when I was teaching, it was more like trying to get them to actually understand it, and you felt like you had to get them like a proper enjoyment. You felt like you have to get them to enjoy it. So the lessons are arguably more interesting now than they were then, I think.
Okay.
But on the other hand, on the other side of it, like, my children are in school. They like the older two have just started school, and what I'm against, and I don't know if this is the case in US schools, but certainly in UK schools, they're just tested to breaking point. Everything is working towards an assessment or a test, and like that seems to be from very, very young, and they're so obsessed with like data. So like, how your kid does it in a test at 5 years old will determine their employment prospects, the way that the schools are set up at the moment. Do you know what I mean? So teachers are constantly trying to move towards that. So I think, like, in that way, it's more difficult. But like, if you talk to any teacher, they'll tell you that kids are not as well behaved as they used to be.
So you've mentioned in other interviews that some of your students were in the audience on nights when your material was young and not as effective as you'd like it to have been. Talk to us about what it was like facing those kids the next day.
Well, it was very difficult because I had basically when I started, I was trying to get more stage time, and there weren't enough gigs where I was living. So my dad, who ran a pub at the time, and he just said, "Oh, just run a gig here." So I started running a gig from the pub, and I was hosting, but I only had like 5 minutes of stuff, so I was just sort of busking and like trying to come up with stuff, and every night was a failure. Like I just sort of died on my ass every single time. And I remember my dad saying to me, and I remember one night coming off, and my dad said to me, "If you want to do this for a job, you will need to improve massively." Like that was his feedback. But the problem was that like kids from the school heard about it and then just started turning up like all the time, like every single gig, to the point where it was like a school assembly. Do you know what I mean? It was crazy. And then they were seeing me at my very worst because like the old cliches, like if you're a musician you can practice at home, but as a stand-up you've got to practice in front of people, otherwise it's not really practice. So I was just having to go into school, and then kids were like quoting failed jokes back to me and stuff like that. I mean, they were sort of doing it in a nice way, but it was still pretty humiliating.
Aww.
But now that you've achieved so much success, do you run into your former students who now have different things to say?
Well, I do run into them, and then they say, we're really happy for you, and it's really good to see what you're doing. And I say, I don't believe you. Like, if that's the case, why were you nice? Why weren't you nicer at the time?
Yeah.
It's all very well jumping on the bandwagon now, do you know what I mean? But like back then when I was struggling, you were ripping it out of me. So, do you know what I mean? Please don't add me on Facebook. I will not be in touch. That's kind of the way I play it normally.
Okay. So we talked about how hard it was after you left your teaching position, and it's certainly fair to say that things weren't easy. You lost your dad right around that time.
Yes. And
you mentioned your finances were taking a toll. So how close were you to putting comedy behind you and just saying, forget it, this isn't for me?
Like I was super close. Like I actually told my wife I was going to stop because I was doing... we'd had our car taken away and we couldn't pay the bills and stuff like that. And it felt stupid because, like, you know, it's not like I'm going off to become a doctor or something noble like that. I'm going off to, like, basically it was a vanity project, essentially. So I was like, this doesn't feel right. And I remember, like, I was on my way. There's this big, like, comedy competition in the UK called the Leicester Mercury Comedian of the Year, and I'd made it to the final of that, or I'd been nominated to go up in that. And I was on my way to that gig, and I said to my wife, like, I don't know why I'm doing this because, like, it's just not, I don't feel like I'm making any progress with it. And she said, look, let's talk about it when you come home. And so I went and did the gig, and I ended up winning that competition. And that felt like a genuine turning, like it felt like a moment, do you know what I mean? Like a corny, cheesy, end of movie, like Mighty Ducks moment, do you know what I mean? Where I just thought, oh, okay, well, maybe I can do it. But then that's not to say the struggle ended there, but it gave me a bit of sort of self-belief. But I would say, you know, I was going to go back to teaching. Like I'd already started making like inquiries about going back to teaching because I just thought this isn't going to work out. Like I really wanted to do it, but it's different wanting to do something when you've got nobody relying on you. If you're making your wife and your son sort of suffer as a result of this kind of dream, then it's not worth it. Do you know what I mean? So I was super close to quitting.
Recently, you moved to your entire family, including your mom, to Los Angeles to try to make it here in America. Is your mom living with you and your family?
She is at the moment. I mean, you say living, I not that she's dead or anything, but I see it as her staying.
Okay.
Yeah, she's staying with you.
She sees it as staying.
Okay.
I don't want her to live with us.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? I like, you know, it's my mum and my wife are not a good combination. Do you know what I mean? Like individually, they're great people. Together, is not great. So I'm sort of dropping subtle hints. I'm sort of saying things to mum like, "Oh, it's a bit cramped in here, isn't it?" And "Oh, it must be a nightmare, you know, with us getting under your feet." But she keeps going, "No, it's lovely. It's like a dream come true." So Project Get Rid of Mum is not working so far.
The subtle hints aren't doing it. You have to do it.
No, I think I'm just going to literally just have to change the lot.
I was going to say you have to do what my father did, which was take the newspaper and a big red marker and circle apartments for rent.
Yeah, I don't think my life would be worth living if I did that, but it might get to that point.
Yeah.
What has been the hardest adjustment for your family between living in England and coming to LA?
I don't think my family have found it difficult, to be honest with you. I think, like, you know, the kids love the weather.
Right.
We've got a pool, so they love that. So they are, you know, and then I took them to like Universal and stuff like that. We're close to Disneyland. And I mean, really, they're loving it. They think it's great. Do you know what I mean? the downside mainly is for me, to be honest with you, because I do like it over here, but I just think people are too friendly. And that is something I'm sort of struggling to adjust to. You know, like, we'll be in the supermarket, whether strangers talk to you and ask you how your day is doing, and I can't get on board with that. Do you know what I mean? I sort of like an insular existence where if somebody talks to you, you assume that they've got some sort of mental issue and you move away from it. Do you know what I mean? So that's kind of what I'm dealing with at the moment. But my wife loves it. I mean, they're loving it, and I love it as well. Don't get me wrong. But I'm just having to adjust to the fact that people talk to you. I find that very, very weird.
It's widely populated on the internet that you have a son, but I know you have other children, but they're not really mentioned anywhere. So can you tell us about how old your kids are?
I've got 3 boys, and so the first one is 8, and he's sort of very chatty and nice. The second one is he's everything that the first one isn't. Do you know what I mean? And then the third one.
You mean he's not nice and chatty?
Well, he's going to be a nice, great adult, but he basically, his existence is to disprove everything we thought we knew about parenting with the first one. That seems to be his ongoing mission in life.
And how old is he?
He's 6.
Okay.
So when we had our eldest, we were like reading all the books, and you know when you do this conflict resolution and you give them options and all, and it worked so brilliantly with him, and I was just like, this is amazing, we're so good at this. And then our second son was like, no, I don't think you are, and I'm going to spend the rest of your life showing you how you're not. So
Aww.
That's kind of his mission. And the third one is too young to really make a judgment call on yet. Do you know what I mean? He's sort of he's nondescript at the moment, so he's only 3, so he's not really. We don't know. He could go either way, so we're just waiting to find out. I'll come back on and let you know once we get a definitive answer on that.
Well, I'll tell you, I have an 11-year-old and an 8-year-old, and I have a similar situation where my 11-year-old is very subservient and does what he's told. And my 8-year-old is the child my parents wished upon me. She is.
I know exactly what you mean. I sort of sometimes I wish that our eldest had a bit of what the second one's got, because our second son's a bit of a rock star. Do you know what I mean? Like he's not going to do anything he doesn't want to. Like if you give him Frosted Flakes and he doesn't want them, he just rocks the bowl over and goes, I'm not having that. You know, all that kind of thing. And our eldest is like super keen to please.
Yeah.
And I sometimes wish he had a bit more of that about him. Do you know what I mean? Just because I don't want him to be sort of too timid at school and stuff.
A pushover. Yeah.
Well, let's move on to some of the TV projects you've been doing aside from the comedy, which actually it goes hand in hand. The series Asian Provocateur. I hope I'm saying that right. On BBC
That's
Three.
Beautiful pronunciation.
Oh, good. It was about a trip to Sri Lanka that your mom actually sent you on to kind of trace your early roots and where you came from and stuff. So, what did you learn from the making of that show?
Not a lot. I sort of got a familiarity with the country of my parents. I think the main thing I got from it was that they come, like my mum and dad are both very, very westernised and sort of essentially like a British Sri Lankan couple. And like my dad ran a pub and my mum's like super into fashion and like music and stuff like that. But what I didn't realise until I went to Sri Lanka was that they actually came from like tiny, tiny rural villages. Do you know what I mean? Where their families were the only families to ever leave that area. So you sort of get like, I sort of think of myself as British, and I'm now in LA, and my brother sort of he sort of travels a lot, and so and that came from 2 parents that came from tiny, tiny villages that no one leaves. So by like getting an eye, like sort of seeing where they come from, it made me feel a bit closer to them, really. Do you know what I mean? I sort of got more of an understanding, because I sort of only knew like British mum and dad, whereas when I went to Sri Lanka and spoke to their relatives and stuff like that and saw where they're really coming from, I got a sort of a greater appreciation of what they're about. In terms of learning the language and any culture, I very much achieved a 0 on that. So that was the downside of it.
Well, I can't imagine taking a 6-week trip. I can't even imagine taking a 2-day trip with my parents at this stage of my life. But I have to say, your mom seems really fun. Like, I saw some of the scenes when you were in a restaurant ordering and that kind of thing. She seems awesome to us to watch.
Yeah.
But that's you've got the benefit of an edit there.
Right, I was going to say, we got the edited version of what happened there.
Yeah, you've got all the bits that are funny and entertaining. You haven't got all the other crap where I'm going to listen to her have a go at me or tell me that I haven't moisturised properly or whatever. Do you know what I mean? So none of that makes it. So if you want the uncut like rushes, I'll send them to you. Man.
Yeah, because that I think would be even more funny.
That would. Well,
yeah.
you could live stream your home and think of the views you would have.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. I might do that without telling her so that people know, because she's nicer when the cameras are on.
Oh.
she's a horrendous dragon when the cameras are off. So I'm just letting you know.
So if the cameras weren't there to document the trip, would you still have taken it with her?
No, absolutely not. I think the cameras stop the beatings. Do you know what I mean?
So,
Okay.
No, I'm only joking. But she does do weird things. Like traveling with her, she stops being independent. So like we'll go somewhere and she just said to me, Romesh, where are the toilets? And I'll say to her, Mum, I arrived here at the same time as you. I've never been to this building before either. I don't know if you think I've done a pre-tour and got acquainted with all of the places we're going to, but I don't know either.
Oh man!
And then another time, we were in a hotel just at the end of days filming, and she said, "I'm just going off to my room. I'm going to go to bed. Good night." I said, "Good night." And then like 10 minutes later, I went, and she's wandering around the corridor, like near the lift. I said to her, "What's up with you?" And she said, "I don't know what button to press to get back to my room." I said to her, "Well, there are two buttons here, Mum. One says up, and the other one says fire. So why don't you take a guess at which one it's probably going to be?"
It's funny because when they were raising you, because it sounds like you're describing my dad. And Dad, I'm sorry because he listens to every show.
Yeah.
But they weren't like this when we were kids. What happened?
I don't know. I don't know if it's like payback or something like that. I've got no idea. Like my mum just shuts down sort of all of those bits, and she I don't know what, like my parents are very, my mum now is very much like, the way that Sri Lankan culture is they do everything for you growing up, and then the idea is that you pay back as they get older. But I wasn't given that. I think that wasn't in the terms and conditions when I was growing up. Do you know what I mean? If I'd have known that,
you could have given her more.
Where was that contract?
I would have been less demanding. Do you know what I mean? I would have like gone, well, I don't want to do this because I don't agree with it. I think the price is too great for what you're giving me. So, but I didn't know that. So now I'm having to do the old payback.
Yeah. During the show, you also had some unusual experiences, from riding an elephant to getting your head rubbed with a chicken. Who sets up these experiences, and do you ever get presented with an idea that you're just like, oh, no?
Well, the riding the elephant was because my uncle thought that it would be a good thing to do. The getting the chicken rubbed on my head, if I'd have known that was going to happen, I would have said no. But I didn't, and neither did anybody involved in the show. So the thing was that that was supposed to be part of a blessing, but there was some sort of miscommunication. Like they didn't get it right. I don't know what happened, but it was an exorcism, is what I got. So they put me in like this cage, and they were like waving a sword around and like rubbing me with this chicken to try and get rid of a spirit, which is what they thought they were supposed to do. So, and I looked at the director when it was going on, and he was in shock because he wasn't expecting that either. But had I known that, and I have walked out on stuff. So, for example, we were in Mexico for the second season, and my uncle took me to this like satanic blessing, where like, and we got sort of blindfolded and taken out into this field where they had this like big sort of flaming sort of pentagram thing, and they wanted me to this is horrible. They wanted me to cut a chicken's throat and like sort of spray the blood over myself. And I just said,
no.
I'll be honest with you, it's not the sort of thing I'm into. I mean, like I'm happy for, it's all these other people here doing it. Good for you. It's just not I'm vegan. I don't know why they thought
that's yucky.
That was going to be okay. Do you know what I mean? So I ended up just walking out. I said, I just can't do this.
That none of that made air, right? I mean, that was all cut out.
Well, no, me walking out all made the show because we went there. We did the first part of it, so we did the first part of that ritual, and then when they got the chickens out and everything, and I walked out, all of that made it.
Oh, okay.
That was all in.
Okay, I wasn't sure if they scrapped the whole thing. Wow.
No, I think they were thinking about it, but they just thought, well, that is his genuine reaction. We'll just keep it in. So.
Do you come up with any of the content as far as ideas for the series at all, or?
No, not. Well, yes, to a degree. Like I sort of. So for example, in the first series, like Mum and I both told them about the different relatives we've got, because we've got relatives all over the place. and Mum sort of told them about the areas, and I sort of, with the Sri Lanka one, I didn't really have any idea, but they'd say to me, we're thinking about doing this, we're thinking about doing that, and there was like a whole selection of things that we could have done for the trip, and I chose. I didn't choose, actually, my mum chose, but I sort of had an influence on, like, if I didn't want to do something or if I thought that was too mad, I wouldn't do it. But in terms of the ideas, for the first season, it's very much them. For the second season, I was a little bit more informed because I knew America a little bit more. I knew those relatives in America a little bit more. So I sort of had ideas about where we could go and who we could visit and stuff like that. But essentially, I'm sort of there for the ride, if you see what I mean. And the problem is that the production company think it's funny if I'm miserable or if I'm in discomfort. So they will always push it in that direction.
Is there a third season coming of this show?
No, there isn't. I just thought I can't, because season 1 robbed with the chicken. Season 2 they tried to spray with chicken blood. I've got no idea where the chicken concept can go for a season 3, so we're not doing it.
Okay. We read a number of places that your mom often upstages you on the series. How big of a role does your mom play in your everyday life?
Well, I'm very close with my mum. The relationship that you see on the show is exactly the same as, pretty much the same as how the relationship is. You know, my mum wears her heart on her sleeve, and she's very open and forthright with her views, and but she means very, very well. She sort of demands a lot, but delivers a lot as well in terms of being a mum. So yeah, we are very close, and she will tell you that we're not close enough and that I don't call enough and stuff like that. But I think that's sort of typical mum-son dynamic. Do you know what I mean? But she, I think, like, it's partly a cultural thing and partly the fact that, we've always lived near each other or whatever. And also, my mum and dad went through their own sort of troubles when we were growing up, and so that brings you closer as a family. So, so I'd say that my mum plays a big part in my life, but she would like to play a much bigger part. She is a supporting actor, but she would like a much more of a leading role.
Yeah. You've guest starred on over a dozen television shows, and we've watched you take whiskey shots followed by a pickle juice shot, which has to be awful. What's the craziest thing that you've been asked to do on television?
Was a few things I can think of. One of the things I did a show called Duck Quacks Don't Echo, which is kind of like a science comedy show, and they wanted to prove that that magnets can support a human's weight very, very easily. So what they did is they gave me magnetic boots, and then they suspended me upside down in the studio, and I had to sort of like walk across a steel sort of bar to prove the point, basically. So I had to. Another thing I had to do was they were trying to show that a vacuum cleaner can suspend a human body. So they put me against a vacuum cleaner nozzle. They made like a Romesh-shaped kind of holder for me, an attachment to the vacuum cleaner, and they put me into that, and then they suspended me over like a crocodile tank. The thing was, it was 10 feet in the air. If it had failed, I would have died anyway. The crocodiles were completely unnecessary. Do you know what I mean? I don't know why. I think it was just for dramatic effect or whatever. But I have done some pretty mad things. It's because I'm desperate for exposure. That's essentially what it is.
So before you took the leap to stand up an entertainment career, were there comics that you watched and enjoyed?
Definitely. Like I've always said that I was inspired by Richard Pryor, and Richard Pryor is the reason that I do stand up. And part of the reason that I've come over to America is because I love American stand up so much. Like I'm a big fan of Bill Burr. He's like my favorite. I love Dave Chappelle. So I'm sort of the thing is with comedy is doing comedy sort of ruins most comedy, because as soon as you start doing it, it stops kind of being funny. Do you know what I mean? Like,
sure.
So when you watch a lot of stand-up, even though you think it's great, you know what they're doing. But then every now and again, you watch a stand-up that you can't see the cogs. You don't know where they're going with it. You can't figure out what the jokes are. It just looks like they're just being really, really funny. And Richard Pryor was like that, and I'd say both Bill Burr and Dave Chappelle are like that. So that's when I really, really enjoy comedies, when I can't see the workings of it.
Okay.
Do you think by watching other comics, do you do it often, or do you think it maybe is detrimental to your own creativity, because it's like once somebody else says it, you can't do it. So how much do you watch it?
Well, I watch everything. Like, I watch a lot of stand-up. I watch more stand-up than I watch anything else, really. So, like, if I'm at a gig, I'll watch all of the other stand-ups if I can, and I watch all of the specials when they come out and stuff like that. And I think that I do that because I enjoy it, but I actually think it's better because you just have an idea of where stand-up is going. It's very changeable, and I know the essence of it remain the same, but in terms of people pushing ideas and pushing the art forward or whatever, you don't want to get left behind. And that's not the reason I watch it. As I said, the reason I watch it is because I like it. But I do think if you don't watch stand-up, then it's very easy to get out of touch. And also, then you're writing a new show, and then how do you know that your stuff is sort of competitive or as good as the other stuff that's coming out at the moment? Do you know what I mean? Like, I think that what I'd hate to do is like be writing a new show and come up with what I think is a new observation or a new take on something, and it's been done hundreds of times before. So I think, if you've got an idea, it is, like, don't get me wrong, it is crushing when you've thought of an idea and then you watch a special and that idea is done in that special. But it's better that than you go out and do it thinking that you're doing something original when you're not.
Okay. Do you have a team of people that you write with, or are you solo in that respect?
With stand-up, I write it all myself. So I think because it's so personal, I can't really ever see myself handing that over to anybody, to be honest with you. But in terms of like when I've done if I've had to host a TV show or something like that, or do something like I did, I was sort of one of the hosts on the last UK election. I did like an alternative election take for Channel 4 and in the UK, and I had writers for that. But in terms of actual stand-up, I'll always write it myself, I think.
Okay.
How strict are you with your prepared material? Are you going there and going to do, this is the show I'm doing, or are you playing off the audience and ad-libbing?
It just sort of depends, really. Like, if I'm trying out new stuff and I'm trying to work up new material, I will stick to the material, because if I go off that, then I'm not testing the stuff out. But when I go on tour, like my last tour of the UK, I was doing, you're doing so many dates, if you just keep doing the same show, it's just not interesting for the audience or for you. So you've got the body of the show, and then you might drop in new stuff that occurs to you as you're sort of on the road. Or you might I do often go off at a tangent. If something happens in the room or I talk to an audience member, I'll often abandon the show for 10 to 15 minutes just going off on that. But you try, the problem with that is it can be a bit self-indulgent. Do you know what I mean? Like, you might think you're mining gold, and the audience just think this guy's just going on about this, and we wish he'd stopped talking about it a while ago. Do you know what I mean? So you have to sort of judge it right.
Okay.
So just released a few weeks ago, there's a new DVD. It's available on Amazon or video download on iTunes. It's called Irrational Live, and you share a lot of personal stories, especially about your own body. So was it ever hard to get over making fun of yourself?
No, I don't think I find it difficult. I mean, the truth is that what I found very early on in doing stand-up is that the stuff that's true is the best, and the stuff that's sort of that you really think is the best, and even if those thoughts are unappealing or sort of controversial or whatever. So, and also the other thing is my kids get a lot of stick from me. My wife gets a lot of stick from me. My friends get a lot of stick from me. So it feels unfair to sort of do comedy about them and then not look inward and sort of talk about myself a bit. So, I mean, in terms of talking about my weight and my physical appearance, it has always been something I've had a problem with, like real problems with, and it's got me down throughout my life. But I think that's when you know that that's the best sort of stuff to tap into. If you're embarrassed about talking about it, you probably should talk about it.
Well, we've all been there.
Yeah.
So
you often use your family as a source of inspiration in your stage act. And does your wife ever give you that look that says whatever just happened better not show up in your show?
To be honest with you, I get that more from other people than her. I mean, she has been very good at just sort of accepting that it might come up, but I don't think she really minds. I mean, I've pushed it a lot, in terms of how much I've talked about stuff, and it's not like, I don't want you to think it's like me going, her indoors and my wife is this, and I don't want to be I do make it clear in my stand-up, I am happily married and I love my wife, but within the confines of that, there are issues and bits and pieces. So I talk about those, and she so far, touch wood, has been unbothered. But I have done stuff about like friends off the back of genuine conversations I've had with them, and they have got annoyed. So it hasn't stopped me from doing it, but they have got annoyed.
Your wife has never put you on the couch before?
No.
Maybe not for your material,
I think
anyway.
If I was doing the stuff and then it wasn't working, and then I wasn't paying the bills, then I think she probably would do. But as long as it's going all right, I think I'm allowed to say what I want.
Okay. Here on Fan Counters, our main premise is to learn about the encounters that you've had with your fans. So I'm just wondering what stories come to mind about your maybe unusual or creepy or weird fan encounters?
Well, one of the things that happens to me a lot is I get food brought to me. And that sounds weird with the weight issues I talked about, but because I'm vegan, I did a bit in my last show where I talked about how I thought there wasn't any good, or how I thought vegan cakes weren't very good, and I thought it said vegan cheese wasn't very good, and then people started delivering that to my shows, like not loads, but just a couple of times.
Uh-huh.
So like one day somebody dropped off a homemade vegan like Black Forest gatto to like the dressing. It was waiting for me in the dressing room when I got to the show, and then somebody said to me, "You should never ever eat food that's been made by somebody because you don't know how they made it."
Right.
But at that stage, I'd already eaten quite a bit of it. So I sort of had to just commit to finishing it at that stage. You know what I mean? And then I get people just turning up with like little boxes of vegan snacks that they'd made, going, "Oh, this is really nice." And I've got to be honest, I ignore the rules and eat it all.
Okay.
I know you're not supposed to, but nothing. But I mean, touch wood, nothing's happened to me. Do you know what I mean? So it's been all right. But you do get like weird things. Like I had one night out. So in England, I live in a smallish town, and so I've got all of my friends that sort of still live around the area. So every now and again, when I go back and I've got a night off, I'll go out and catch up with them. And we're out for a drink, and this guy came up to me and said, like a group of lads, must have been like early to mid-20s, and they said, "Oh, can we have our photos taken and stuff like that?" I said, "Of course," and then they started asking me about how my evening was, and I said, "Yeah, it's fine." And then they went away. Then they came back again and sort of made a couple of jokes and quoted some stuff back, and then they went away. And then they came back and they said, "Can we join you for the evening?" And I said, I was sort of being polite, but I said to them, "That sounds great, guys, but we are still strangers." Do you know what I mean? Like we're not friends.
Right.
And then they just got very angry, and they sort of started saying that I thought I was. I don't know. They weren't angry. It wasn't like they didn't get aggressive. They just went, "Oh, I didn't realise you'd be like that. Didn't realise you'd be like that," and then just sort of wandered off. And then later on, I was sort of outside. This is a very long story, isn't it? But I was outside the pub at the end of the night, and one of the counters says, "My friend says you're not very funny." And then I said, "Well, I don't think your friend's very funny either." It's not my best comeback. I'm not going to lie, but it was the only thing I could think of at the time. And then he said, "Why are you being like that? Why are you being like that? You've really got arrogant." And I said, "I'm just repeating back to you what you said to me. I mean, this is crazy." Do you know what I mean? It's just, so it went from very, very pleasant and nice to horrendous. Do you know what I mean? And that seems to happen to me a lot in the UK. Like I was out for an anniversary drink with my wife at our local pub, and you can see pubs play a big part in this. But anyway, I was sort of I was at the pub, and a guy came up to me and he said, "You're that comedian, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Can you tell me a joke?" And I said, "Well, I don't really have jokes. Sort of just moan a bit."
Right.
Because there's not really jokes. And he said, "We'll do one now." And I said, "Well, I don't really." I said, "I'm just sort of having a drink here." And he goes, "No, do a joke." And I said, "Well, I don't really want to do a joke." He goes, "You're not funny in real life, are you?" And I said, "No." I said, "No, I'm not." And then he calls his girlfriend over and he said, "I told you wouldn't be funny. Look, he's not funny." And then she went over and grabbed like a little a child carrier seat thing with a baby in it. And she said, "This is my baby." It's very surreal, this conversation. I said, "Right." I said, "Great."
Uh-huh.
I said, "Do a joke about my baby."
What?
And I said, "Well, I can't really just do a joke. I don't know your baby." And then she said, "Just do a joke about my baby." I said, "I don't know, it's ugly." And then she said, "That's not a joke." And then they just sort of started telling me how they thought I wasn't funny and not a nice person in real life. And then I just said, "Okay, I'm just going to go off and enjoy my anniversary drinks, thank you." And then I just let them do it.
That's so weird.
I do have positive interactions as well, but those are two that stick out.
Okay. No, that's cool. What about a fan or even somebody that you encountered that at the time you didn't think much of the conversation, but it did leave an impact with you? Have you had somebody impact your life But you didn't know it at the time?
Yeah, so I did. I sort of did a show, my first Edinburgh show. I had a bit about. It's a very, very short bit about the fact that when I left my school, when I left my school as a teacher to go into comedy, that they did a big party to send me off. But as part of that party, they put a big Sri Lankan flag up as part of the party. And not realising that actually that I come from the side of Sri Lanka that have been sort of that my side of the family, that my family of are Tamil, and they've been quite persecuted by the Sri Lankan government. So I just sort of made a joke about the lack of understanding that shows. You're sort of essentially putting up a flag of a government that sort of oppressed my people. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm,
and I sort of made a joke about that. Anyway, I didn't think anything of it. I just thought it was a funny story to tell as part of my show. Afterwards, I left the gig, and there were like 2 or 3 Sri Lankan guys there, and they said, really like that bit, that story you told, and I said, oh, okay, cool, and they said, and they got photos done and everything. They just walked off, and then a few nights later, I was doing the show again because you're there for a month doing the same show, and I came out, and those guys are there, but they're with other people. And they said, we've heard this thing about you sort of exploring this area in your show, and we just wanted to say thank you. And it felt good, but also embarrassing, because I hadn't written it to make a point. I'd sort of talked about it just because I thought it was a funny, interesting story. So there was no ulterior motive, but they sort of took something from that, and it made me think a bit more about sort of, I guess, my culture and talking about it in stand-up. And I genuinely believe it was that sort of interaction that ended up leading with us to us doing, eventually leading to us doing Asian Provocateur, because it sort of set me on that line of thinking that ended up making me think this is a good thing to explore. Do you know what I mean? So I think from that initial conversation, I ended up doing a TV series off the back of it.
That's awesome.
So, like us, you have a podcast called Hip Hop Saved My Life. At the time of this recording, you have about 40 or so episodes. Tell us a little bit about your show.
Well, the podcast it just came from an idea of I'd been constantly surprised by, because I'm massively into hip hop, I've always listened to it and I love it. And I'd been surprised by how many people I didn't expect to be into hip hop, to love it and talk passionately about it. So I had this idea of just chatting to people. But it was 2 things that came into play, which was, 1, I wanted to do a podcast about it, and 2, I'm very lazy. So we did one podcast where I happened to be the comic that's into hip-hop, and then I think it was something like a year before we did the second episode.
Oh my gosh.
That's the level of urgency we applied to the podcast. And then we just started doing it more and more regularly, and then gradually it sort of expanded beyond comedians. We started getting celebrities on, and then we started getting rappers on, and the conversation very much depends on who we get on. So if you get, sometimes we've had comedians that don't know that much about hip hop, but they're funny, and so you get sort of comedically good podcasts. And other times you've got people that are rappers who are really intense about the music, but aren't particularly necessarily funny. So you get a bit more of a nerdy one. So, and we sort of try and just go with the flow in terms of however the guest wants to take it. We won't try and push it, try and throw a load of gags in if it's a rapper who's not really comfortable with that. So it just sort of depends. So the show is it changes depending on who we get on, but we should have done a lot more than 40 episodes by this time. It's been going 2 years. I mean, I don't understand how we've only done 40. That demonstrates a really terrible work ethic, so I apologise for that.
Well, besides being lazy about it, what's been your biggest challenge that you've realized with that show?
That music people don't ever turn up when they say they're going to do. So if ever you've booked a musician, you have to have a backup guest or a backup plan, because they will call you as you're in the studio to tell you they're not coming. So that has been a bit of a challenge. But also the other thing is I think just making people feel comfortable. I mean, you guys know, you interview people, you just have to. I guess it's a skill that I didn't start off being very good at, and I'm still not great at it now, but I've got better at it than I was, of just trying to get the best stuff out of people by making them feel relaxed and comfortable, and that is something that takes a bit of time to get the hang of.
And how about the biggest highlight of the show so far?
The biggest highlight for me was, I think it probably was talking to Charlie Tuna from Jurassic 5, because I'm just such a massive Jurassic 5 fan. And we recorded in like this little studio, and I just sort of I knew that he was in London, like doing a show, doing a couple of shows, and I just asked on the off chance that he might come on, and he agreed and turned up and like gave an hour and a half of his time and was like really, really amazing and nice. So, and I had to try not to be too sycophantic in the podcast as well, because that's not entertaining. To listen to some guy just go, yeah, no, you're amazing. Yeah, no, tell me another thing about how amazing you are. So I had to deal with that. Like I had to try not to fanboy too much, but it's pretty amazing.
It is hard to rein that in sometimes.
It is.
I've had issues.
Very
with that.
hard, yeah.
Yeah.
I know you guys have found it difficult now, for example.
Exactly. How did you?
Yeah.
Am I being that obvious?
Yeah.
Dang, I was trying to control myself.
In addition to live performances and television appearances, we've read about a possible book you might want to write. How's that going? Have you started that yet?
I have started it. I've not made a lot of progress. No, I'm doing all right. I mean, every now and again I'll knock a chapter out, and then a couple of days later I'll look at it and scrap it. So that's kind of what's happening at the moment. I have definitely written a book, but I've also deleted that book. So I'm sort of in the middle of it now, but I can't ever settle on being happy with what I'm writing. So it will happen. I just don't know when yet.
Okay.
Well, we promoted your show that you have coming up December 21st at the Greek Theater in Los Angeles. You have a comedy show. Tickets are available on Ticketmaster.com, or you can go to the Greek Theater's website. But this is an interesting show because you took a risk and you've bought out the entire theater. So,
yes, I have.
Like, are you crazy? I mean, where did the idea come from?
The idea came from this. It sort of came from this. I think I'm a victim of this chase your dream mentality that's prevalent in like films and stuff like that now, where you think that if you just do it and believe enough, it'll happen. But as it turns out, it won't. So, I mean, I've massively overstretched myself. Do you know what I mean? It's a romantic idea. And I just thought, give myself a really massive target and run at it. And I am running at that target, but it's a lot further away than I anticipated.
Does your wife think you were totally crazy, or was she on board with the idea?
She does think it's crazy, but she's also come to expect this sort of thing. So she wasn't surprised, but she did say had I consulted her for advice, she would have urged me to reconsider.
All right, so let's talk about the show a little bit. What can people expect from the show? What do you got planned?
I guess it's just me sort of giving my my worldview, really. Do you know what I mean? It's just me looking at things inside, like family life, but also looking at things outside in the world, and just sort of giving my take on them, basically. And also, it's sort of uplifting in terms of you leave feeling great about the fact that you're not me. And that's kind of the strongest endorsement I can give it.
Oh my gosh. So coming up just days after the show at the Greek Theater is Christmas.
Yes.
Does your family celebrate that holiday, and what does it look like at your house?
It looks like us trying to avoid going to my mum's house is what it normally looks like. But
you can't do that
now.
this year.
Yeah.
You're stuck.
I know. So we do celebrate it. I mean, it's mainly us trying to stop it's just basically the kid. Essentially, it's Lisa, my wife, and I just sitting around and commenting on how the kids are not appreciating the presents they've been given, and then we eat a big meal. So that's it, really.
Yeah, that's what all of us do.
That's funny. So I always ask guests this because there's millions of hours of content out there to watch and all of this stuff. And even when I have guests on the show, it's like I can't watch everything that they've done because I would never get anything done around the house or with work. So my question for you is, what do you recommend? What's on your DVR right now?
Well, my two favourite things are, well, if you haven't watched it, I love Stranger Things.
Everybody's been saying that, and I watched the first season, and I need to start the second season. Have you done both?
The second season is very good, but what I would say is there is one episode in that season that I don't know if you've heard about, but it is the worst thing to happen to civilization in the last 20 to 25 years, I would say, that one episode. But the rest of it is brilliant.
Okay.
And the other thing I love is It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Ah, okay. All right.
So those are like my two favourite things that I go back to. And then otherwise it's just stand-up specials. I keep going back to Dave Chappelle specials. I'm a big fan of those. So those would be my recos. And also the other thing I'd say, not on DVR, but at the cinema, go and watch Coco.
Oh, that's the animated movie.
Yeah.
Did you take your kids?
Yeah. Well, it's on our list. It's just hard to get my kids to the theater because we just never have any time. But that is very much on our list.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very, very good. It's great.
Did your 6-year-old enjoy that?
He didn't actually, because he didn't want to go.
Oh.
But we took him because it's a family outing. But he protested the screening, so he faced away from the screen for the film.
Aww.
Oh, right then.
Yeah.
So with Christmas coming up, are there any Christmas specials or Christmas movies that your family likes to watch?
We always watch National Lampoons. That's our thing.
That's a good one.
National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation is the one that we sit down and watch every year.
Besides the show at the Greek, do you have future performances scheduled, or are you thinking about a tour? What does 2018 look like for you?
Well, so I'm going to be gigging a lot, just like working up new material and stuff like that. So I'll be all over the place gigging. And then I'm probably going to spend the next year writing a new show and then tour it the year after. So I'll probably start to warm up the tour towards the end of next year, and then I'll hit the road properly sort of January 2019. That's the plan.
Awesome. If you come to Milwaukee, I'm going to be emailing your rep because we want to do another show with you.
Yeah.
Listen, that'll be the first one, man. Milwaukee. That's the place to start the tour, is what I've heard.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah. By all means, let us know.
I endorse that fully.
Okay.
So, Romesh, before we finish, where can we find you on social media? Where can we follow you?
So I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Romesh Ranga, and I'm on Facebook, and I am on Snapchat, but I can't remember my login for that, so there's probably no point.
No point in following you there.
No.
All right.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time, and thank you.
Thank you, you too. Happy Christmas. Bye-bye.
Bye. Romesh was very funny.
He was
I don't know
funny.
if he realized he was as good as he was, but he was excellent.
Yeah.
So listen, if you are in the Los Angeles area for Christmas, make sure you stop by Ticketmaster.com or the Greek Theater's website to get your tickets for Romesh Ranganathan's show. I'm sure he's going to be funny. His clips on the internet are hilarious.
Yes.
So please go do that. Romesh Ranganathan playing the Greek Theater December 21st in Los Angeles, and you can get your tickets at Ticketmaster.com. If you want to find us online, you can just go to Facebook.com/Fancounters or email us
at hello@fancounters.com.
And next week we are back with a country music superstar.
Billy Dean.
Billy Dean will be here, and I can tell you he's got a lot of new projects he's working on, and some that you will be very surprised to hear about. Let's leave it at that.
Yeah, I don't know how that man can still look this good at 55, but I should have asked him what skincare products he's using.
Probably more than what we can afford on our podcasting free salary.
That's right.
Anyway, all right, till next week, we'll be back with Billy Dean, and I hope you have a good week.
Bye.